Okay, so you've put together your music with a DAW like Reaper. You've gotten it just right the way you want with the tracks and their contents. You've done your edits. You've added effects and envelopes and so on and so forth. Now you want to share it with the world. How do you do that? That's what we're going to talk about in this video, is the process called rendering your DAW project. We'll talk about why it's necessary and some key configuration options to keep in mind during the rendering process. In terms of why it's necessary, I want to go back to this thing I showed in the very beginning of this module, the RPP file format. And you may remember, we talked about this when we were talking about non-destructive editing, how what a DAW is actually saving on disk is not a bunch of amplitude values, is not a waveform or anything like that. It's not audio at all, in fact. What it's saving on disk is this description of how all these different audio files, like this one referenced here, come together on different tracks, with different settings to make your piece of music. And this is what you have to show for your work, is this RPP file, and this HTML, XML kind of format. If you send this to someone and say, hey, listen to my music, they're not going to be able to, most likely, because they would have to have Reaper, which is the only thing that can actually interpret this and make music out of it. And they also would need to have all of your source audio files as well. So what we want to do is, once we're finished with our multi-track mix in Reaper, we want to render it as usually as a stereo audio file, some standard format like a WAV or an AIFF or an MP3 or something like that we can actually share with other people. Because then anyone will be able to open it in whatever they want. So I want to walk through how to do this and the various configuration options we need to think about. So I'm going to go over to Reaper, where I have a simple version of this 8-track buildup that we did in the editing video several videos ago. So it brings in these things one by one, and I also, just for fun, added in an effect with some distortion that comes onto the drum track at the end, so that it'll kind of match the timbre of this white noise a little bit better. So it sounds like this. Okay, and we're done. So now I want to share this with people. So I'm going to go to the File menu in Reaper, and I'm going to choose Render. And first thing I have to decide is, what do I want to render? Usually I want to render everything, my master mix, all tracks. But there might be instances where I want to render just a particular track with all the effects and edits on it, or a particular set of tracks. So I can use this pop-up menu to do that. What do I want to render in terms of time? Usually I want to render my entire project from start to finish, but I might want to specify a particular start time and end time as well. Then there's some basic things that specify where I want this thing to go, save it to my desktop, what I want the file name to be. I pick my sampling rate and my number of channels. This may or may not match what you're using in Reaper. You may be using a higher sampling rate, but then you want to encode something at 44,100 hertz at the very end, because that's a more common rate for the people that are going to be using it and their software and hardware and what it supports. Or you might just want to save disk space when you're distributing this at the end. Then I also want to pick an output format. So right now it's set to do a WAV. I can also go straight to an MP3, for instance, if my goal is to put this up on my website or something. I don't necessarily want people downloading a giant WAV file. I want them to just be able to hear the MP3. And then I might select my bit rate, how high of a quality I want that MP3 to be. So now I've got all those settings set, and I can go ahead and hit render one file here. And it's going to go ahead and render it for me and save the file to my desktop. And then I can go to my desktop, and I should be able to find the file right here. And I can just listen to it anything I want. And you get the picture. So it includes not only all of my edits and all the audio content, but it also renders this distortion effect, this envelope at the end. So that's how rendering works. And I just want to briefly recap all the things that we've done in Module 2 now, because we have covered a lot of ground with DAWs. We talked about the key DAW features, multi-track audio editing, non-destructive editing, automation, and time synchronization. We talked about how to record and import audio into the DAW and how to do basic editing operations, and how those compare to doing the same editing operations on analog media like records and reel-to-reel tape. We talked about how to add audio effects, how effects chains work, and how to automate those effects through envelopes and automations in a variety of ways. And then we talked about a bunch of basic audio effects as well, volume and panning, visualizers. We talked about delays, filters and equalization, dynamic range compression, and a reverb. And then finally, in this video, we talked about how to render our DAW projects into standard audio file formats like WAVs or MP3s, so you can easily share them with other people.